Hey everyone, Dan here. We're doing the big one. So if you've been following the channel over the past couple of months, you'll know that from like community posts and even just like my videos, you'll know that I've been doing a bit of a Doctor Who marathon of the Tombaker era. I've mainly done this for a couple of reasons. One, to kind of get back into Classic Who, because I've not watched a lot of Classic Who for the best part of like half a year, really. I've really not watched a lot. And secondly, to kind of reignite my love for the show in time for the 60th anniversary. Ironically, I'm filming this like an hour after the new Strictly trailer dropped, and it is bloody awesome, that trailer. Anyway, back to the Tombaker era. I've watched every Tombaker story from Robot to Logopolis, all in order. Most of them I'm rewatching, but a couple of them for the first time. And I want to get some content out of this because I've spent 2 months doing it, so I want to get something out of it. So this video is going to be a bit like the old every something Doctor Who stories reviewed, you know, like the specials or, you know, the ones I used to do, like late last year, early this year. So yeah, I'm going to be giving my quick thoughts on every Tombaker story from Robot to Logopolis. A few little things though before we get started. One, it's just a televised story, so no expanded media like Big Finish audios, books, comics, all that stuff. Second, it's got to be stories from his era, so stuff like The Day of the Doctor or The Five Doctors. Yeah, Tom Baker's in it, but they're not Tombaker era stories. Third, I will be talking about the unaired Shada. I'll be going off of the, you know, the 2017 animation, you know, they've got the cast to sort of fill in with the voiceover for the bits that were never made. And also, it's just my opinion, so don't fret, guys. Anyway, we've got a lot to get through, so let's get down to business, defeat the Hunts, and review this damn era. Robot is such a brilliant introduction to the Fourth Doctor, and I think having a John Pertwee-style story with Tom Baker, it highlights just how different and free-spirited and anti-establishment the Fourth Doctor is. You know, it's a unit, earthbound story with a nefarious organisation and think tank, and they're really great as well. Sarah's brilliant, the K1 robot is iconic, and the fact that it's kind of, the robot has a bit of an identity crisis reflects how the Fourth Doctor is finding his new identity. I think that those kind of themes are really interesting. Robot just sets up so many interesting ideas and motifs and themes, not only like plot-wise, but also with the character of the Doctor, how intelligent and silly he is, but it's also just really damn fun, and honestly, it's one of my favourites of the era. The Ark in Space is revered as like an all-time classic Doctor Who story, and for me, I don't really see that. I mean, RTD once called it his favourite story, I believe, and again, I don't really see that, but it is really good, don't get me wrong. Tom Baker is excellent, he's very alien, and like the Homo sapien speech, it's brilliant, he's brilliant. His dynamic with Sarah and Harry is brilliant. The world building on the Nerva Beacon, it's great, there's a real mystery and real creepy atmosphere about it all. The Wirren are pretty good as like villains, but overall, it's a pretty standard like base under sea story that's really well done, but for me, it doesn't really go sort of above and beyond, both on paper and in execution, which is what I look for in the best Doctor Who stories. But it's still really good, don't get me wrong. Next up, the Sontaran Experiment, which is decent. I think it's a fine little two-parter. I mean, the Sontaran, he's really good. I like some of the kind of brutal stuff with his experiments. There's a kind of bleak atmosphere that's pretty good. And I like how it kind of builds on what the Ark in Space did with the sort of future post-apocalyptic Earth. But overall, the story, the direction, the kind of side cast and the characters, it's not overall doing an awful lot. And it's only 50 minutes, so there's not a lot that it can do, but it's perfectly fine. Don't believe in contrarianism for the sake of it. Genesis of the Daleks is still, for me, the best Classic Who story and one of the all-time best Doctor stories. It's a deeply profound story on hatred, brutality, war, conflict, totalitarianism and fascism, and what the destruction that can lead to. It is a bleak story, and it's conveyed so well through the direction. It's the imagery is so vivid. The characters like the Carlos, like Davros himself is amazing. The best version of Davros, he's terrifying. The Daleks, what little they do, they're brilliant. Nida, Ronson, Garman, Raven, all these Kala characters, they're great. Even the Thals, they're horrible. Like, it's not good and bad. The world building is so nuanced, and there's not a clear villain necessarily. It's so thought-provoking. Even the Doctor's morals are tested. Like, he becomes more aggressive, you know, culminating in the "Do I have the right" scene, which is one of the greatest scenes in Doctor Who ever. I mean, everybody's sung the praises of Genesis already. I don't really need to add anything, because there is a reason why it is the monolith that it is. It's just perfect. Revenge of the Cybermen is the first clear dud of the Tom Baker era. The story's just a poor man's Ark in Space. The sidecast are boring. The Vogons and their society is boring. The Cybermen are really dull in the story. They're not very interesting. Tom, I enjoy Tom in the story, but there are some odd, like, out-of-character moments, although I think the issues that a lot of people have here, I think, are exacerbated in future stories. Honestly, I really don't have the energy to really hate this story. It's just bland for me. Moving into season 13 with Terror of the Zygons, I think this is where the Philip Hinchcliffe sort of gothic horror style really starts to come into effect, even though this is still an Earthbound unit story with the Brigadier and Benton, and it's great seeing them again, but I think it's really effective, the kind of English village setting and the, the woods, it's really effective. There's a very moody atmosphere, and there's some really great lighting on the Zygon ship. Speaking of as well, the Zygons are really great monsters. I love the kind of shapeshifter story and the kind of mistrust angle. I think it's really effective. The Doctor's really fun, and it's just a really strong story, great direction as well, although the Loch Ness Monster is a bit crap. Planet of Evil is a pretty good Doctor Who story. It's got some decent ideas, like the kind of antimatter monster, and like they're at the edge of the known universe. There's some really good set design here, and some good atmosphere. Tom Baker's very good, but overall, in execution, it's a fairly bog standard Doctor Who story, fairly standard characters, fairly standard plot beats, and it's definitely the weakest of season 13. But you know what? That's a very high bar, so don't feel too bad for it. Pyramids of Mars is a stone cold classic that kind of just gets everything right. I like the way it reappropriates Egyptian mythology, but in the context of a Doctor Who story with a kind of good and evil conflict. Tom Baker's more serious, stoic approach to the character is quite refreshing and, sells the level of danger. And Sutekh is one of the scariest one-off villains we've ever seen in the show, and all he does is sit in a chair, The possessed Marcus Scarman is a really great, creepy human villain. The robot mummies are really great, like foot soldiers, they're very intimidating. Lawrence Scarman is a really great, sympathetic character. Sarah Jane's fantastic here. The atmosphere in the Priory is really creepy. The way it plays around with time travel is very ahead of its time, and it's just an all-round masterpiece that doesn't put a wrong foot in anywhere for me. The Android Invasion is another really underrated story for me. It's just a real comfort story, a bit like Robot. I love the Earthbound Pertwee style setting. I love the kind of Invasion of the Body Snatcher style story with the androids. I love kind of AI sort of stories like that, and the low-key English village setting is really good, and it's really engaging. There's a great mysterious atmosphere that you can't trust anyone. It's nice to see Harry and Benton back, and seeing like familiar faces from Unit kind of reinforces the whole idea of you don't know who to trust. It's really good. The mystery about Crayford, he's a great character. I think it starts better than it ends, but overall, I really enjoy it, and it's low-key one of my favourites of the era. Doctor Who does Frankenstein with the Brain of Morbius, and I do wish, honestly, that the whole Timeless Child link with the Morbius Doctors in the end of Part 4, I wish that didn't overshadow this honestly really great story. As I said, it's a really solid homage to Frankenstein. There's some really quite gory, violent parts of the story. It's got a great spooky atmosphere. Solon and Kondo, they're a great sort of villainous double act. The Morbius creature's iconic, and it's just a really solid story, but the Sisterhood of Khan stuff does grind the story to a screeching halt. It's the weakest part by far. I love the Seed of Doom. This story is one of the absolute best of the era, just shy of the top 5. It's just brilliantly written, some great dialogue. Tom Baker's fantastic, and it's kind of more serious demeanour. It's really great. There's real stakes in the story. Great scope as well, the 6-part length. It doesn't drag, and there's nice locations like the Arctic in the first couple episodes of the story. A bit like John Carpenter's The Thing, and I love that film. And then you've got the mansion at the end of the story, and it's really quite epic in scope. Harrison Chase as the villain is mad but brilliant. Scorby is one of the best henchmen characters we've seen in Doctor Who. The Krynoids are really a great monster and a really quite creepy, and it's just an excellent finale to an excellent season. Okay, I will admit I'm probably a bit biased towards the Masque of Mandragora because I have visited where they filmed the story, but I do find this quite enjoyable and a bit underrated. I think it's got a really great atmosphere, the direction is really good, the location work, as I said, it's got a great period piece kind of setting, and there's some fun set pieces like the sword fight was really cool, and Tom Baker's "You Can't Count," that was really fun line. Music's solid as well. It's just, I think I really enjoy the feel of the story. I also really like the themes of religion versus science, because it's set in Renaissance Italy, isn't it? And I like how that informs the plot, the character dynamics, the historical sort of context. But the main issue with the story is that the main threat of the Mandragora Helix is really murky and undefined. You don't get a clear sense of what the stakes are. So with a better threat, I think the story could have been a hell of a lot better. Hand of Fear, Sarah Jane Smith's final proper story, is a brilliant story for the most part, except for part 4. That really drops the ball. It's really bad, but the first 3 parts are fantastic. The premise of the petrified hand is great, and the mystery about it is really good. Liz Sladen, for her last story, gives a excellent final performance. The Eldrad character, villain, she's great, and the production is really great. The nuclear power plant setting and the filming is really great. There's plenty of great supporting characters, and it's just really great overall, except for part 4. But it does sort of come back around with that amazing exit scene, which is genuinely really heartfelt. The Deadly Assassin is now one of my all-time favourite stories, not just of the Tombaker, but of the entire show. Like, top 5 of the entire show for me, I think it is that good. It's a genuine masterpiece, from that opening, almost Star Wars-y kind of opening crawl before that was a thing, to the amazing climax in part 4. It is genuinely a masterpiece. Tom Baker single-handedly carries this story so well that he must have had back pain after he finished this, because it's just flawless. The Master is really creepy in the story, the Time Lord Society is interesting, and the corrupt manipulative side is portrayed so well. Goth is a great side character. The kind of political thriller framing feels very 70s, but doesn't really date the story. I think it just adds another great layer to the story. And the Matrix stuff, whether it's like in concept or through the amazing direction, is some of the best Doctor Who you will find. It is a genuine masterpiece. Okay, I know I've already thrown about most underrated story of the era already in this video, but I think The Face of Evil probably takes the crown of the most underrated story of the Fourth Doctor era, because I genuinely adore this story, and I think it's so overlooked, which is criminal. Tom Baker is on fine form in this story, some brilliant writing and brilliant dialogue and brilliant moments. Leela makes a great first impression as a companion, she's really great here. So it's got some of the best world building of the era, it's so rich, like the gloomy atmosphere of the forest of the Seventeen tribe, it's great, and the ideologies of the tribe, it makes it feel like a living, breathing world. And then the plot twist of the whole, Zoan and computer, the Doctor was here before, and it split the Tesh and 17 people, apart. It's such an interesting idea, and it feels very ahead of its time. It feels very new series-esque. And I've already mentioned how I love, like, AI gone wrong sort of stories, and I think this is a great one. I like the ideas of, like, free will and whatnot. And although I think it does start better than it ends, but I genuinely love this story, and please give it another watch. I implore you to give it another watch. The Robots of Death, for me, is probably one of the most rewatchable of the era. I often go back to this one. I think it's one of the most tightly crafted of this entire era. It's maybe not the most life-changing narrative ever committed. It's a fairly simple Agatha Christie murder mystery kind of in space in the future, but it is so well done thanks to great writing, acting, production values. It's genuinely great. I think the main murder mystery story is really simple but very effective, and especially on rewatches, you're kind of looking for clues as to who the killer is. It all clicks into place really effectively. The Vok robots are a really iconic, creepy monster, and the uncanny design, the kind of themes of robophobia, it's really great and very interesting in my opinion. D84 is such a lovable character as well, he's great, and all the side characters are really fun. The Sand Miner is a really cool setting, and the kind of sandstorms add an extra level of danger. Tom and Leela are great, the dialogue is brilliant, it's just an all-round classic, and I don't see anybody disliking this one. The Talons of Chiang is a great Doctor story and a great end to the Hinchcliffe era. It is just such a shame that its depiction of Chinese people, from the yellow face to the slurs, and its general depiction, is so outdated. I mean, especially when you compare it to anything Doctor Who post-1966, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Also, I do find the story a bit too long, and the giant rat looks a bit naff. But other than that, it's a genuinely great Doctor Who story. Tom and Leela are great. Jago and Lightfoot are some of the best Doctor Who side characters you'll ever find. Magnus Grill is a really great, compelling antagonist. Mr. Sin is a really creepy, robot character. The atmosphere of Victorian London and the kind of sewers and just the direction of the atmosphere, it's really great, really creepy. The theatre setting is really good. And there's a real kind of playful, dark humour in this story that I really like. It's just overall a great watch. And as the story goes on, it gets better and better. And it's just a shame that those few blemishes do dampen it somewhat. Horrifying Rock is an interesting one. I think it's got a really great unsettling mood and atmosphere, the soundscape and the lighthouse setting. It's really effective. Tom Baker is more serious as well. This is one of those times. Leela's pretty good. The Rootin is a pretty interesting threat. The sidecasts are enjoyable, and there's kind of like an interesting sort of class divide with the lighthouse workers and the cruise ship, the upper class people. I think it's kind of interesting, but I do kind of find it a bit slow and meandering a little bit at times. And I don't know, I don't think it does anything exceptional, but it's a solid one. It really is. The Invisible Enemy is the first story to feature K9, the Doctor's iconic robot dog, and barely anyone talks about it. Kind of speaks to how dull and forgettable this is, because it's just the most generic space age kind of story, and they're trying to do like a Fantastic Voyage homage, but inside the Doctor, and it's just dull. The effects aren't very good, and it's really overly ambitious in that regard. And the plot is just dull. There's holes in the plot. The characters aren't memorable, and overall it's just boring as anything. It's so forgettable and dull. Image of the Fendahl is a story that I feel like I should like more than I do. It's a gothic horror story, and I feel like I should like it, but I don't know. It's a really odd one, but not intentionally. It's just really oddly acted, oddly structured. There's a bit too much going on. Maybe it's a bit busy of a story. and I just don't connect with it. Like a lot of the ideas and characters and monsters and all that, I just don't connect with this story that much. But I don't hate it. I think it's got a really great gothic atmosphere, some solid direction, particularly in part 1. I think it starts off quite strong. Louise Jameson, Leela's actor, has previously said that The Sunmakers was her favourite story to work on, and I've got to say, I do agree it's the best story of season 15, although I do prefer the Hinchcliffe era stuff she was in. I think this story of any of season 15 really sets out to show what the Graham Williams era was all about. It was the more witty, comedic take on sci-fi, and it had some biting satire on like taxes and like the economic troubles that Britain was going through in the 70s. Bob Holmes' script is quite fun. The villains are larger than life, but also have a slimy edge to them. It's just a really fun story. My only problem would be that the direction is a bit flat and lifeless, but overall, I think it's a really easygoing story, and it's just a really fun, feel-good one. I've already done a video review of Underworld, but overall, it does nothing right. It's the worst of this era, and genuinely nearly sent me to a bloody coma. I think watching paint dry for 100 minutes is a more worthwhile endeavour, to be honest. The Invasion of Time is probably the story of Tom Baker's era that annoys me the most. There is so much wrong here. The Doctor is completely out of character, just the whole him acting evil and like a knobhead. It's so irritating, and Tom Baker's probably worst performance of the show. The Time Lords are just dithering old farts. The Vardens are crap monsters. The constant deception with everyone, like the Doctor, the Vardens, the Time Lords. You don't care about anyone. Leela is done a great disservice here, and her exit is dreadful. And because the story wasn't drawn out enough, in the final 2 parts we get some Sontaran stuff, and the part 4 cliffhanger is very good. But overall, they're just here, and then they go around the TARDIS, which just looks dreadful. It's just an abandoned hospital. It's just so bad, boring, and it annoys me to no end. Now we're on to the Key to Time season with the Ribos Operation, which I think sets up the whole Key to Time arc quite well, and I think it sets up the dynamic between the Doctor and Mary Tam's Romana quite well. I really like their dynamic, it's really great. But the actual story being told here, I don't find particularly engaging. The world building, the characters, the double acts, it feels very samey and standard and a bit tired. And for a Bob Holmes script, that's usually his bread and butter, but honestly, it feels quite played out at this stage. There's not really a lot here that I care for. The Pirate Planet is definitely the peak of the Key to Time season. It's a really inventive, fun story that Douglas Adams finally coming in to show his sort of quirky, witty vision of sci-fi. It's a great premise of the hollowed out planet materialising around other planets to plunder the resources by this insane robot pirate captain. It's a genuinely great premise. Speaking of, the pirate captain himself is a really memorable antagonist of the era. He's got a robot parrot, which is just such a fun addition. Mr. Fibuli, he's like the banter and interaction between those two. It's really fun to watch. The Doctor and Romana, I love seeing their dynamic develop further. And while I wouldn't call this story a masterpiece, it's such a fun, fresh, creative story. The Stones of Blood is a story that I never used to like when I was younger. I used to call it the weakest of the season, but now I've got to say I really enjoy it. I like the kind of genre shift of you start off with a typical gothic horror story and then it transitions into a sort of comedic sci-fi trial. It's a really fun genre shift, and it's quite subversive and clever, and from new writer David Fisher, it's very fresh. I think the horror sort of stuff has a really nice moody atmosphere, some really good direction. It's got some fun side characters like the older professor lady. She's quite a fun character, and the Doctor bounce off her quite well. And honestly, I really enjoy the trial stuff, which is I never used to like that, but now I do. I think it's a really fun little section, and Tom Baker is really on fine form. He's really fun and energetic and lively. He just puts on a court wig doing it, and it's fun. It's a bit slow paced, I'll admit, but yeah, I enjoy this one. From one David Fisher story to the next, we've got the Android of Tara, which again feels very fresh and subversive because it kind of blends genres and styles. You've got the kind of medieval, fancy, feudal sort of aesthetic, which I think is really well realised, but you've also got the android plot, and I love those kinds of things when you merge them, and it's just really fun. There's some fun side characters. Count Grendel, he's such a slimy villain, and I think he's really effective. The whole sort of doppelganger thing with Romana, that's quite fun. The sword fight's really cool. It's just overall a really quite fun, light-hearted little story, and I really enjoy it, and it's a standout of the era. The Power of Kroll is a story about a massive squid monster that eats a bit of the Key to Time, and you've got these men painted green shouting, "Kroll, Kroll, Kroll," and it's somehow really boring, whether it's the swamp people, whether it's Kroll himself, whether it's the crew of the refinery. None of it is interesting, and I just don't have anything to say about it. It's just a really bland story from Bob Holmes, and it's one of his weaker ones, definitely. Okay, here's another bad one, the Armageddon Factor, the absolute worst of the Key to Time season. It's a terrible end to it, and the thing is, The bulk of the story is just this generic space opera, Star Wars, nuclear war thing that you've ever seen. It's got bland characters, bland villains. Romana doesn't get a lot to do, which is a problem with the end of the Key to Time season. Like, she just gets nothing to do. If that wasn't bad enough, the resolution to this, where they put together the Key to Time in the last 5 minutes and then just chuck it away in the end and defeat the Black Guardian, is an absolutely pitiful excuse for a resolution. That is not how you resolve a season arc. It's just appalling. The only thing that I like is Tom Baker and the inclusion of the character Drax. That's it. Destiny of the Daleks is by far the worst classic Dalek story, and it's not even close. It fundamentally misunderstands the Daleks. They're just generic robots here. Another race of robots, my arse. No, they're not robots, but here they are. So, Jesus Christ. Davros is completely unengaging and such a bland character. Their plot is dull, the Movellans are pretty bland, the direction is so poor, like there's no sense of geography here, the production is coming apart at the seams, Davros is banging into walls, the Dalek props like bump into each other, and it's just such a tacky, boring, low energy story. However, Tom Baker, Lala Ward, and the on-fun moment here and there do salvage it a little bit. Bit like Underworld, I've already done a review of City of Death, but basically it's one of the best of this era, and it's probably the most fun I had in this marathon. I was just grinning from ear to ear. It's perfect. It's a masterpiece on the level of the Mona Lisa itself. The Creature from the Pit is a really odd story. I do think there is potential in this story. Some of the ideas and world building and the concepts, like the whole feudal and materialistic conflicts and kind of the monopolising of metals and whatnot. I think there's some genuinely interesting ideas, but I think some of them have already kind of been done better in the Android Tara. It's another David Fisher story, by the way. And I don't know, in execution, it just doesn't really come through. I don't know. Again, I think characters kind of fall into that. There's some good performances here and there, but I think they could have been expanded upon a bit more. Like, Lady Dastra is a pretty decent villain, like, in performance-wise, but the character, there's a bit more there. The Eredo creature, unfortunate design. Romana feels really odd. It still feels like they're writing for Mary Tam. I know it's the first story they recorded this season, but still, it's really odd. And that's the thing. It's just a really odd story. I don't really know what to make of it. It's thoroughly just mediocre. Nightmare of Eden is a genuinely great Doctor Who story, unironically, and no, you didn't hear me stutter then. Yes, the production values are flimsy as hell. Yes, it's overlit. Yes, the Mandrels look really cuddly. Yes, some of the guest cast are kind of hamming it up, but the story is genuinely excellent. The whole conceit of the two spaceships colliding and it's a host to a drug smuggling operation, I think that's really great. And the thing, like, other than Gridlock in Series 3 of New Who, I don't think there's any other Doctor Who story that's really tackled, like, drugs, and especially in the classic series at this point, it's really bold territory for Doctor Who, and I really respect the story for that. And then the twist later on where it's revealed that the Mandrels, the creatures, to actually decompose into the very drug that's been smuggled. I think that's a really great twist. And really what it does, it creates a sense of pace and energy. It keeps the viewer on their toes, essentially. You know, keep guessing of what's going to happen, how is this going to unfold and unravel. It's really great stuff. I also think as well, because the Grown Woman Zero was more comedic in tone, I think when the people are under the influence of the drugs and they're sort of laughing at all the danger around them, there's a real dark comedic edge to that. I really think it works. It's really effective. And also some just great imagery, like the two spaceships collided. There's like the projector where you can go into the different worlds. There's the bit where the Doctor's like fading in and out as like one of the cliffhangers. And Tom is really good here. Like, there's some really good humorous moments, but also some pretty good serious moments when, like, at the end when he just says, "Go away," really coldly. I think, genuinely, give this story another go. It's a genuinely underrated gem of the era. And then on the other end of the underrated Doctor Who story spectrum, we have the Horns of Nimon, which is a complete farce. It's a complete pantomime. Graham Crowden as the villain's camping it up. There's a security guard who just keeps saying, "Weakling scum," and then when he dies, he falls over and splits his trousers, and then that's repeated in the cliffhangers thing for the opening of the next episode. This story is daft as anything, and I bloody love it. I have actually already done like a video review of this story, so it was about like nearly 2 years ago now, so I mean, my opinions haven't really changed that much, so you can check that one out. But overall, it's just an absolute delight to watch, and I'm never bored watching this, and that's key. It's such a fun time, even if it is quite crap. Now, do take what I'm about to say about Shada with a pinch of salt, because obviously I'm going off the animated version where the non-made things were filled in with animation, and, you know, so it may have turned out differently if we actually got it, but overall, I really enjoy Shada. I think it's a great, you know, story from Douglas Adams. It's witty, creative, fun, and, you know, conveys a real epic scope, but in a kind of low-key way, in a kind of quite charming way. You know, you've got simple things like the book or the sphere, you know, simple props, but they convey a lot through through clever storytelling. Or what about having a Time Lord whose study is at Cambridge University is his TARDIS? Kenosis is a really fun character. Skagra, Christopher Neame's villain, he's one of the more enigmatic villains of the era. He's very memorable. Tom and Lara are great. The stuff in Cambridge is fun. The other side casts, they're pretty fun. And it's just a generally really enjoyable story and a great end to this era. And now we move into Tom Baker's final season, season 18, into the 1980s with John Nathan Turner producing. We have the Leisure Hive, which is one of the worst of the era. I have always hated this story, and I really hope that I would enjoy it more on a rewatch now that I'm older. I still don't get what the hell this story's trying to do. So season 18 tried to introduce a bit more science into Doctor Who, and in this story we have the science of tachyon particles, which is the idea that these tachyon particles can travel at faster than the speed of light, right? I had to look at Wikipedia to try and understand that, because the episode doesn't convey it well through dialogue or through visuals. Like, why did they need to separate people? Why is Tom Baker split apart or becomes old? I don't know. Is that meant to be... I don't get it. And it feels so pretentious, like, because tachyon science, it's a theory, right? It's a scientific theory. And the Argolians, they keep saying, oh, the Earthlings don't have this kind of concept. It's like, it just feels so pretentious and up its own arse. The story also looks crap. It just, the Argolians and the Pharmacia look dreadful. It's really boring. Nothing really of note happens in the story, and it's just an absolute slog. Tom and Lala look like they don't want to be there, and I don't blame them. The only thing that genuinely does save the story is that the direction. There is some pretty cool direction, some decent shots and dynamic movements. That's literally it. Meglos is campy 80s Doctor Who, but I honestly kind of enjoy it. I know it's not the best story ever, but I honestly do have a good time with it. I think there's some fun set pieces. I love the Meglos creature, and having the Doctor play the villain is really fun. I like doppelganger kind of stories, like the Android Invasion. I like those kind of stories, so I enjoyed it. It was cool seeing Jacqueline Hill, Barbara from the Heart Era. It's cool seeing her in a supporting role. That was pretty fun. I also find it quite novel seeing some of the new 80s effects, like the technologies that they were trying to implement in the story. That was pretty fun. And overall, season 18 has these kind of running themes of entropy, decay, like a dying universe, and I think Meglos kind of shows that off well with the whole Meglos is the last of his race, and his planet is just a desolate wasteland, and he's trying to survive by merging with that human and also the Doctor later on. I think, these are interesting themes that I enjoy in season 18. And I acknowledge that it's not perfect, but I have fun with Meglos. Full Circle is the start of what's known as the E-Space trilogy. The next few stories take place in another universe, E-Space, and this is by far the weakest, and I just find it really bland. I do like the look of it. It's got a great visual style, the great atmosphere, the Marshmen rising from the swamp. I think it's good location work and direction. But I couldn't even pretend to care about the themes or the characters, and I just don't particularly care about the story. I just find it kind of dull and boring, so I just don't have a lot to say about it other than it looked quite nice. State of Decay is a great little throwback to the gothic horror days of the Philip Hinchcliffe era, written by Who legend Terrance Dicks. I think it's just a great story, and whilst it does feel reminiscent of those older days, I think the themes of decay and a more feudal society held back of progress because of the vampire's rule, I think fits within the themes of season 18. I think it's just a really nice marriage of the two. The story has a really great atmosphere. There's some great location work in the woods. There's some spooky stuff with the bats, the vampires. They're really effective, gothic horror stuff. The vampires themselves are a great trio of antagonists, especially the main one, Orcon. He's got such a presence, and they're all fantastic. And their links to the Time Lords and their war with the great vampires, I think is really great. And also there's a sense of danger, the Doctor reading that scroll, and he has to stop them even at the cost of his own life. There's a sense of danger. It's the Doctor genuinely seems like he doesn't know if he'll make it, and I think it sort of foreshadows later in the season with Logopolis his inevitable doom. And I think that's again another recurring thing in season 18. I love what season 18 does with these recurring themes and ideas, but State of Decay on its own is still a genuinely great story. Warriors Gate now, this has got to be the weirdest story of the era. I like it, but I don't know why, because it is so weird. I love the feel of the story, the white void, the gate, the weird night robots thing. The Farrells are really interesting creatures, and the kind of commentary of slavery. It's quite interesting. It's done it way before Planet of the U did it, but it's such a weird story, and I don't get what it's trying to do half the time. It's so out there. And I think isn't there a Target book coming out soon, Warriors Gate and Beyond? And I think that Beyond section is going to be very helpful, because I think everyone needs that extra bit of clarification. It's the Mulholland Drive of Doctor Who. I like it, I don't know why. There's something almost fairy tale about the Keeper of Traken. There's something really I don't know, like the Melka statue, the gardens, like there's something weirdly like fairy tale about the Keeper of Traken, and I just really like it. It's quite a simple story compared to like some of the others in season 18, but in that simplicity lies just a brilliant story. The world of Traken feels very fleshed out and interesting. The kind of harmonious sort of feel of it, I think, is really interesting, and how that sort of is disrupted with chaos. I think it's really interesting. Characters like Trimas, Cassia, they're very interesting. Nissa makes a great first impression as a companion, and I think this is where Adric kind of comes into his own a bit. He has Nissa to bounce off of, and I think they really work well together. Tom's very good. Jeffrey Beavers as the Master, I think, is great for what little he can do, and the Melka, you know, it's really good. His voice is so... like, there's something about his voice, he has a real presence, and I think it's really effective. There's some brilliant production design in this story, and overall, it's a nice marriage of sort of the themes of free will, possession, that you found in the earlier, like, Philip Hinchcliffe era of the Tombaker era, but you've got these ideas of, you know, decay and death, that, you know, with the Keeper of Traken himself dying, and chaos is ensuing on Traken. I think there's genuinely, again, a nice marriage of the two, and I really like the Keeper of Traken. And now, our final story, Logopolis. What a genuinely brilliant way to end off Tom Baker's mammoth run as the Doctor. You know, as I was saying, season 18 has these themes of entropy, decay, heat, death of the universe, and like a dying universe, right? And having that at the end of a Doctor's era, especially the long life of Tom Baker's Doctor, I think it's really appropriate, and the fact that, you know, he's aware of the end, and I think it's done in a really brilliant way. Like the Watcher, how that kind of links into that is really brilliant. You know, I think it's just really effective, but the fact that the Doctor kind of knows that the universe is dying, and to save it, he's got to die himself, I find there's something strangely profound about this story, and I just think it's really effective. I think the TARDIS team are fun. Adric and Nissa are obviously mainstays now, but Tegan, I actually quite like her in the story. I think she's a good foil for all the madness around her. Anthony Ainley makes a great first impression as the Master, you know, riding the fine line between being dangerous but also quite funny at the same time. And Tom Baker gives a powerhouse performance for his final story. You know, the wisdom and the knowledge, and it's just the knowing quality that he has. He knows that this is his end. I think that he's absolutely incredible in this story. The music throughout is brilliant. The production, I think, is pretty solid as well. And the regeneration at the end has always been one of my favourites. I just think it's genuinely excellent, and it's just a great way to end the era. And that is the end of this mammoth video reviewing every Tom Baker story. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on any of these stories. Do you agree? Do you disagree? That's all cool. But yeah, just, you know, let me know your opinions in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because I do have more Tom Baker era content on the way. I do want to do more videos on this era, so stay tuned for that if that's interesting to you. And until next time, I will see you later. Take care, folks.